I like to make one recommendation on that. Whether you choose to do planned or unplanned drills, it's always a good idea to contact your local, whether it be school police department or the actual dispatch of the police department that's in your area. Advise them that you're going to be running a drill that day, roughly what time it's going to be done. That way, if you do get the erroneous instructor or student or somebody that calls out to a parent that something's going on, law enforcement is already prepared. They've already advised the officers in the field that this is a practice drill. Okay, just one recommendation for
Rich,
you.
yeah.
Yes.
Let me just add one other thing. I think for all of you school people, the most important thing to keep in mind for you is it's not the response. The response has been described. This will be done very, very capably by law enforcement. They will come and they will do what they do. For you, it's all about the preparation. The preparation is really what's under your control. So if something happens, if people are feeling comfortable, I know what to do, I know why it's important not to panic, I know where to go, that's the kind of thing that you can control, and that's where the practice comes in. And really getting feedback from your people, be they teachers or school secretaries, are we doing this well? Are you comfortable with the way we're doing it? I think that's the preparation that will really make it work for you if something happens.
And as Superintendent Gordon said, I want to also go back and reiterate. We really strongly recommend that, because now the law allows you to remove that piece out of your comprehensive safe school plan, do it. That's really important. And the education code is in the slide on your handout, so you'll know where that's, if you haven't done it already. I don't want to insult folks that have already done it, but we see that as huge. So, and again, lastly, I just want to conclude by, this is kind of the way we train, and again, you don't want Sergeant Wynn or these folks necessarily educating your kids, but just allow us to do what we need to do and help take care of you until the incident's done. And we'll give it back to you and even help you along the way with reunification and things like that we are able to do with the manpower that we have. And we believe we'll have plenty of officers there to help you. But understand that we will give it back. And I never really wanted to be a teacher, but you can have your school back, and we will leave it as best we can. Tony.
I've worked in both Elk Grove and now San Juan Unified. Large number of campuses, very old, and multiple access points from any which way. So the debate going on right now that I'm getting a lot of phone calls as Safe Schools manager, locked doors or not?
Yes.
And that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Are you saying as far as the response to law enforcement as an incident, or is it on just a daily basis?
Daily policy.
Teaching with doors
Yeah,
locked,
that-
I think is what.
Here's your dilemma. I'll give it up with you, Randy. And we do this for a living in both worlds. And here's your dilemma: is lock the school doors. You tell people to lock the school doors. Still, educational institutions, elementary schools, high school, middle schools, are just like active shooters. They're dynamic in nature. You lock the door, but you can have your holiday gathering out in the quad, and all the doors are locked. I don't think that any of us in this room, unless anybody wants to add that, we have the answers to what happens when a horrific event may happen at your school. I think what we know and what we see is that you as school leaders, you as superintendents, if you can bring safety to the forefront of your people's eyes, that it will allow our schools to be less vulnerable to violent occurrences. Less vulnerable. But shopping malls, workplace, soft targets are vulnerable to people that are going to do bad things. What we try to do today, for the most part, is show you what we do. These people train us. These people train us to come in and eliminate or bring that threat to an end. And what we've tried to give you to the best of our ability is some tools to help us with all of the aftermath. And the planning beforehand that might prevent it and have these person go someplace else. to do what the craziness they're going to do. Whether they be a student, whether they be a parent, whether they be a random person that has no attachment to your school. That's the best we can offer. We give you some tools. The flip chart, nothing more than section 1 of your safe school huge plan, right? It's a huge plan, 19 components, bullying. We do one, guideline. How do you get guideline? The guideline. These guidelines, word for word, are in your safe school plan. We didn't, safe school plan, word for word, open up for the public, open up for a teacher. That's your guideline. Tactical response, if it's in there, take it out. We recommend it. But that's the best we can offer. And I wish we could answer all those questions for everybody that says all these suggestions, lock, don't lock, gates, don't lock, gates, unlock, don't lock.
The problem is, these are the most dynamic, dangerous, and chaotic events you could ever be involved in. And unfortunately, we can't put the information in one side and have the computer spit out an algorithm that gives us the answer on the other side. They're all different. And unfortunately, yes, ma'am.
Sorry, kind of piggybacking on that question, is there any organization that comes out to school sites to kind of give them recommendations of what is a good?
The question is there an organization that comes out and gives suggestions to school sites?
I think what you're gonna,
Yeah, you'll find that the actual initiation of the emergency action plan is actually a requirement of you folk right here in this room. That is your responsibility. It is our responsibility for the response side, from the law enforcement component of it. We will definitely come in and share with you that response and help you fine tune it, but we can't come in and write your plan, but we will definitely come in and help fine tune it and help integrate that law enforcement response on the backside.
I think what you're gonna find post Sandy Hook again, like we saw after Columbine, is you're gonna see a lot of people offering you services in terms of consultation and extensively looking through your plans and giving recommendations. It's probably gonna be a private sector component. Certainly would involve people with prior law enforcement, emergency response experience, things like that. So, but as you can imagine, with how many schools in the county of Sacramento, it would almost be impossible for the sheriff's department to go in there and do that thorough of a job for each and every one of you, unfortunately. As I was saying, is unfortunately you can't just put the information in and have the computer spit out an answer, because these incidents evolve. They evolve for several reasons. They've evolved over time just in terms of weapons and capabilities and things like that. They've evolved because of our response to the incidents. They've also evolved because, as Rich said earlier, alluded to the fact that these suspects study one another. They learn from one another. They learn what worked. They learn what didn't work. They talk about the mistakes. They talk about the things they could do differently. You look at some early instances back in Paducah. 7 and 9-year-old kids pulled the fire alarm to get the kids to go out and basically create the density for their victims. Put them on the field where there was no protection, no cover, no concealment, and then they could take them off like that. In Virginia Tech, the suspect brought his own instrumentalities to block and barricade and chain the doors so they couldn't escape. So they do study, they do learn from one another, and they do evolve. Subsequently, we too must occasionally look at our emergency action plans and our response tactics to make sure that we're evolving with them. Although the suggestion is that you do a comprehensive review of your EAPs at least every 3 years, I'm going to tell you, and I'm sure Lieutenant Jones would agree, that you guys should probably be looking at them internally, whether a discussion, a tabletop, or a full-blown test or evaluation of your plan, at least every year, preferably at the beginning, so you can make sure that every teacher or everybody that's on your campus, internally and externally, is familiar with your plans. That's your teachers, your administrators, your executives, your facilities people, whoever control your buildings and your systems and all your plans. If you have a human resources or counseling component, all of those people are on board. And then externally, us, law enforcement, fire, our emergency services personnel, our counselors, people like that. So again, I can't overemphasize the importance of at least occasionally testing yourself in the form of some kind of action plan or test where you can actually, one, put your emergency action plan to use, see how it works, highlight things that went well, right? Validate some of the plans you have in place, or validate some of our law enforcement response tactics. Identify some areas for improvement or some responses in or gaps in your response plan or your emergency action plan, so we can fix those, so the lessons learned. And then the most important part is the follow-up to make sure that the lessons you learned from that incident were actually implemented. Because oftentimes what we see is lessons learned and never change. So it's important that we do that. A couple of things that came up, I made some notes when we were talking. Again, I think, this whole conference here is really to get your juices flowing or get you thinking about the things that you could be doing internally. Again, the discussion and the renewal or the refreshing of the relationships between the school districts and law enforcement component is really important. But what we really want you to do is pull those plans out, look at them, update them as necessary. Again, test them if you can, but update the MOUs, make sure those plans are in place, and then give you some ideas for future training. Training you can do for your teachers. What does law enforcement look like when we respond to these incidents? We could be coming from all over. As we know, since Columbine, your initial first responder law enforcement is going to be the officers in that particular area, district, or division. They could be patrol officers dressed like me today. They could be detectives in plain clothes. They could be undercover officers throwing on a raid jersey. What will they be armed with? Handguns, rifles, shotguns, shields, who knows? Okay, you got to be prepared for that. What do gunshots sound like? Are you mentally, physically, and emotionally prepared for what you could see? The bloodshed, the carnage, the death, the injured children. What are we as law enforcement professionals going to do? We're used to going and helping bleeding kids. In an active shooter situation, unfortunately, we're not going to do that. We're going to run by them, even though they're clinging to our legs, until we can be certain that the threat's been mitigated. Okay. After that, we're going to go into our rescue mode. And then also, probably for you guys, I think the biggest headache is going to be notification and reunification, as Rich alluded to in the slideshow presentation. And then also the diversion of all the parents going to the school when you really need them to go to the new location, wherever that is off-site. Generally not going to be something pre-identified, because as you can imagine, if these bad guys are learning from our response plans, if they know where our reunification is, there's going to be a component to address that as well, right? So another thing I was thinking about, what does a suspect look like? You know, it's really hard to give you the absolute, but what we can tell you statistically is that 97% of these bad guys are male. The bulk of them are going to be between 13 and 20 years old. We've had them as young as 7, but generally speaking, they're going to be 13 to 15 block was about 38%. The 15 to 18 block was 30-something%. And now with the college instance, we're actually getting that third category, that 19 to 23 range is growing a little bit, so it constantly changes. But generally male, generally between 13 and 20 years old, almost always had some connection to the school, whether they're currently a student or were a former student. And again, we're specifically talking about school violence. So when we talk active shooters, we have a whole other component of workplace violence. That runs the gamut of people pissed off because they got terminated, or maybe their wife or husband's having an affair at the place. So that's a whole different thing we deal with. But in terms of school place violence, particularly for you guys, that's the information that we can tell you. Almost all of them had made some comment to a friend, an acquaintance, a sibling, or a family member that this was going to occur. Again, we talked about the planning and research that goes into it ahead of time. These aren't spontaneous events. They put a lot of effort. 90-some-odd% of these people, 93% of these people are planning the events. Again, doing the research on the internet. Almost all of them had some connection to mental health professionals in the past, whether it was counseling. We know that a lot of the suspects are broken homes. So a lot of these people were having or displaying some issues and went to counseling for one reason or another. Again, does that help you out a lot? I don't know. Not all of these people that fit this mold are active shooter suspects, but most of them look kind of like that. So the hard part is really differentiating that category from these people. If that makes sense.
Rick, one of the most significant challenges you guys are going to have as administrators of your districts is taking information from the teachers that's coming via the students. Johnny next to me has made some statements about having a gun or wanting to bring a gun to school, bring a knife to school, or he's mad at so and so. Whether it be in person, whether it be through some sort of social media, and that's the biggest wildfire you have out there, that social media leak. Because not only do the students grab onto it, but so do parents and other concerned citizens, and it just runs through your community with a fever. It's going to be a challenge to look at each of those and say, is this credible? How far do I need to follow this up on? Minimally, it should go up through the principal of that individual school. It should be brought to the attention of that principal. Then whether or not it goes into a safe school program if you have one, or whether it goes up to the district pass and beyond that and it involves law enforcement outside. But please don't just dismiss them randomly. Give them the credibility, at least enough to look at to determine, is there a threat there? We will come in and help with that risk assessment, with that threat assessment overall, and determine whether or not this student actually poses a viable risk in your school. Law enforcement is challenged with doing that. But as we talked about these EAPs beginning of the year, I challenge every school